The story begins with our main character, known as the Baskerville family's hound, Vikir van Baskerville. He was wrongly framed by his family and father for being friends with the demon clan, even though he was loyal to them, and was sentenced to death by guillotine. Vikir, at the moment of his death, thought to himself that if he were to ever live again, once he caught his prey, he would no longer live as a hound ever again. An unsettling scene surrounds Vikir as he tries to make sense of his environment. Feeling his body heavy and in an unknown and loud place, his first thought was that he was in hell. But it turns out to be the grand estate of the Baskerville family. Babies are seen in their cribs, crying and making noises. A man, the patriarch of the Baskerville family, comments that the babies are insignificant. As he walks through the room, he could only see that there weren't any special children, only trash gathered around, but then he notices Vikir being silent compared to the other babies. He orders the servants to bring the babies to the cradle of swords, and the servants obey. Vikir recognizes the man as the main culprit behind his death in his previous life, Hugo le Baskerville. Seeing Hugo's younger appearance, Vikir concludes that he has regressed to when he was a baby. Recalling his past life, Vikir had lived his past life as a hound, born from an illegitimate family and received training in a poor environment. Hounds must be devoted to missions like assassination, intelligence, ambushes and bethreatening. A hound needs to take care of all kinds of dirty work. This was so the Baskerville family could remain the best among the 7 families. Vikir remained loyal because he wanted to be acknowledged by the family and Hugo. However, 10 years after the demonic gate was opened, even with the humans' victory over the demons, the reward that was given to the loyal hound, Vikir, who had served the family his whole life, was being put down like a simple dog. The main reason behind his execution was that he knew too much. Vikir clenches his fists, swearing never to live that life again. He wants to take revenge immediately but is unable to due to his baby's body and rolls around angrily. Vikir realizes that he needs to become stronger and that the Cradle of Swords is the perfect opportunity. The Cradle of Swords is a trial that every child in the Baskerville family must go through. Children are thrown into a maze of swords, where they need to reach the Styx River to be assessed for their talent. The Styx River is a legendary river that turns the bodies of children into iron but is limited in the number of children it can affect. Vikir recalls that the fastest route to the river is a straight path out of the helix-shaped wall of blades. He crawls past the swords, with blood covering his baby clothes, remembering that in his past life, he could not receive the effect of the river because of his siblings, which made him determined to make sure this time is different. 4 men watch as Vikir dunks himself into the river, wanting to keep the Styx River's blessing all to himself for as long as possible. Vikir begins to sink into the river. The water seeps into his body and bones through the cuts. Being first made a huge difference. Vikir covers his mouth, as he was determined to endure for as long as he can, no matter how painful it was, he needed to endure it. 2 servants shout at Vikir to come out of the water, warning him that he was going to die if he stays underwater any longer. Hugo simply laughs. He asks Barrymore, the head butler, how much time has passed. Barrymore replies that around 7 minutes have passed. Hugo is amused, stating that Vikir might die since 7 minutes have passed. Hugo calls out to Vikir, calling him his son and asks him to come out. Vikir ignores Hugo's calls and continues to absorb the power of the river with all his might, even sucking in the water of the river through his baby mouth. But then he loses control, his eyes turning white as he continues to himself to endure the pain before blacking out. Hugo holds Vikir by the foot, stating that staying in the river wasn't enough for the baby and that he even drank its water. Hugo notices that Vikir has already grown his teeth. Hugo asks Barrymore what the child's name is. Barrymore replies, Vikir van Baskerville. With a smile on his face, Hugo speaks Vikir's name, saying that a very greedy son has been born. While being held upside down, Vikir continues to plot his revenge against Hugo, waiting to sharpen his canines for the time when he can rip his head off, promising that the Baskerville family will disappear into history by his own hands. Vikir van Baskerville was Hugo le Baskerville's bastardized son, who was also known to be a genius at the age of 8 but was considered normal in his family. At 20 years old, he took on assassination, espionage, and conquest-type missions. At 29, he felt the limits of his swordsmanship compared to others in the direct lineage of the family. At 30 years of age, the demonic realm gate was opened, marking the beginning of the demon's clan invasion. At 35 years of age, he endured the era of destruction, slaughtering monsters left and right. At 39 years of age, the long war finally came to an end with the victory of the human realm. At 40 years of age, Vikir was finally rewarded for his loyalty. The reward? Defamation, false accusation, and the guillotine's blade. Vikir opens his eyes, looking at the ceiling, realizing it is a nursery. He flips over in excitement as this means he has successfully absorbed the power of the Styx River, which meant that he was at a better starting point in his life than before. A servant approaches and places a box in Vikir's crib, questioning why the madam would give such a thing. Vikir wonders why anyone would give him a gift. The box opens slowly, with a dark mist coming out of it. Vikir is taken aback as a long, dark figure slithers out of the box. Vikir recognizes it as a viper called Bloody Mamba, realizing that the madam had sent rare vipers here to kill him. Knowing who madam is, as there are only a few that are called that in the family, which meant she sent those snakes to reduce the competition. The vipers hiss at Vikir, who knew that these things were capable of killing all of the babies in the nursery. But to our surprise, Vikir quickly grabs both vipers by the throat while smiling widely like a blood-driven hound, expecting such treatment from the Baskervilles. He strangles the vipers with force, thinking to bring down the family with his own 2 hands. Bloodstains are seen on the bedsheet of the crib as the vipers no longer made any sound. The next day, the servants are shocked, seeing Vikir sleeping soundly while surrounded by the dead bodies of the deadly vipers which had been ripped to pieces. Orders were given to execute the nannies after being tortured, the ones on shift the night the vipers came, but the reason for their appearance remains unknown. Only Vikir knew the truth. 8 years later, Vikir sits in class, listening to a lecture. The teacher talks about the different levels of swordsmanship. Those who cannot yet imbue the sword with mana are considered a sword beginner. The level at which you can infuse the blade with a little bit of mana is called sword expert. When the blade emits mana in liquid-like aura form, that is sword graduator. The final level, where the aura is solid in its form freely changeable, is called the sword master. The teacher notes that the strongest member of the Baskervilles, Sir Hugo, is at the sword master level. The children are in awe of this fact. Knowing that Hugo was already a sword master at this point in time, Vikir thinks to himself that he needs to regain his strength that he had, just like in his previous life, before his coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher notices Vikir being lost in thought again and highlights his achievements. Having a strong body due to diving in the Styx River for 7 minutes, and teaching him one thing would lead him to understand 100 things. He is more talented than the others, and the patriarch would be happy with this. While Vikir thinks about how long it will take to kill Hugo at the age of 8, a set of triplets grins widely as they stare at him, their eyes red with a scary thought in their heads. A hand shoves Vikir as he is being called garbage van. It turns out to be the triplets. Having heard the strange rumors about Vikir being in the river for 7 minutes and strangling 2 vipers when he was a baby, they approach him. Vikir remains silent as he recalls his memories of these 3, knowing they were the ones who stabbed him when he was running away due to the defamation in his previous life. They were called the Hugo Le Baskerville Trident. We'll simply call them high, middle, and low, all 9 years old. They shout at Vikir to stop lying, stating they don't like him. Knowing they'll be troublesome in the future, Vikir decides that it was a good idea to put them in their place now. High points a knife at Vikir, stating that Vikir's body was like steel since he was in the river for so long, making him immune to injuries from blades. High asks if he can test it. High calls Low. Low covers Vikir's mouth to stop him from breathing, stating he will eat his hand if Vikir endures for 3 minutes. Vikir decides to play along with their scheme, realizing that even children could be cruel. 1 minute passes, as High and Middle believe the rumor is fake. 3 minutes pass, and they realize Vikir is good. 10 minutes pass, and they are too stunned to speak, realizing that the rumors about Vikir were actually true. They decide to let Vikir go, since it was no longer fun for them to mess with him. But then a crunching sound is heard as Low looks at his hand, and blood appears. Vikir spits as Low screams in pain. High and Middle shout at Vikir, asking what he is doing. Vikir, with bright red eyes and blood all over his mouth, gives the triplets a creepy smile, repeating that Low said he would eat his hand if he holds on for more than 3 minutes. High and Middle refute by saying they aren't scared of Vikir, but Low is afraid as he holds his bleeding hand. High and Middle stare at Low in disbelief, who complains to them that he had gotten his finger bitten off. They attempt to leave to find a priest to fix Low's hand, but Vikir stops them. In anger, High stabs Vikir in the stomach, stating they are older than him. To his surprise, the knife doesn't cut him. Vikir twists his arm in response to the sudden attack, causing High to scream in pain, while he reminds them that they were a part of the Baskerville clan, where power and talent are greater than age. High continues to scream in pain as Vikir twists his hand. Vikir, in hound mode with his blood-red glowing eyes, grins widely and tells them that they were going to play with him till the very end. High, in pain, shouts that the rumors are true as Vikir lets go of his hand, before giving him a punch straight to the face. Middle and Low are shocked as High falls to the ground with his teeth broken and nose bleeding. Middle attempts to fight, but Vikir simply kicks him to the side with no effort. Low stumbles onto the ground, shocked at what has happened. Vikir tells him not to be afraid, as he'll get better in no time once treated. But he warns him, as he picks the knife off the floor, that he won't be leaving the room and that they have to live with the discomfort of their own bodies at this rate. Vikir decides to be generous and offers one of them a chance to leave the room right now as he stares at the knife in his hand. Low asks which of them could leave, as the other two brothers hold onto their wounds. The knife is tossed to them as Vikir tells them to decide among themselves. Vikir slowly exits the room, mentioning he can't wait too long and that it should be decided quickly. With blood-red eyes and a grin on his face, Vikir turns to them as the door closes, saying at least one of them should live. As the door closes, the triplets are left in shock but soon stare at one another. Sounds of fighting and yelling are heard behind the doors as Vikir stands listening, smiling. The trident of Baskerville was beginning to split apart. In another part of the estate, Barrymore reports to Hugo that another bloody situation has occurred with the Morgue clan regarding the ruby mines, with the Morgue clan stating it was theirs. Hugo says an opportunity in the future will allow them to discuss it properly and wonders what else there is to report. In regards to the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress, Barrymore reports that Vikir scored the highest in the written exam. Hugo smiles happily at that fact and wonders when the practical exam will happen for the children at the juvenile fortress. In 5 days, Guardian Knights have left to prepare, Barrymore replies, making the fortress completely empty now. Barrymore hesitates at first but further reports that there was a big fight between the young masters, stating that there were no deaths, but that High's teeth have been completely damaged, Middle's jaw was smashed in, and Low's left index finger was amputated. They had recovered from their physical injuries, but their mental state was damaged. Hugo is surprised to hear that the triplets were fighting amongst themselves, as they were close with one another. Barrymore states that Vikir was involved, causing Hugo to be alarmed. Vikir stands before Hugo and Barrymore with a huge smile on his face. He greets Hugo as the patriarch. Hugo tells Vikir about how he disabled the triplets. Vikir replies that they have received the proper medical treatment since then. But Hugo wasn't interested in their physical states, instead he talked about how their hearts were disabled. Since the day of the beating, the triplets were no longer eating or talking together anymore, making their combination technique completely fall apart since their relationship was practically non-existent. Vikir smiles silently after hearing that, after all, his plan worked. Hugo asks if it was wrong that Vikir turned his brothers into a total mess. Vikir, with a cold dead look in his eyes, replies that he was simply stronger and wonders if the stronger person is ever wrong. Hugo shares that his brothers came before and forgave him, so he questions Vikir whether he feels an ounce of shame. Vikir couldn't believe that the triplets actually forgave him, which made him recall a past memory where the youngest daughter of a family that was ruined by the Baskerville clan came and paid Hugo a visit. She had become a nun after many years, and told Hugo she forgave him and offered him a mass. Hugo's response after that mass was, as Vikir speaks out loud, "Forgiveness is just an excuse made by the weak who cannot seek revenge due to their lack of strength." Vikir's eyes glow red with a unique shine as he speaks those words. Hugo is elated at what was said, smiling widely with the same look in his eyes. Hugo recites the family motto, "Only the strong will reign supreme, weakness is a sin." Hugo rewards Vikir by allowing him to take any snack from the food storage, just enough for him to carry. Vikir is happy and asks for chocolate, thanking the patriarch for the reward. As he turns to leave, Hugo calls him his son and tells him to do well on the interim evaluation, not to lose to direct descendants. Vikir is disgusted by what he hears but replies, "Yes, my lord, anyway." In the storage room of the clan, Barrymore introduces the infamous chocolate enjoyed by the gourmands of the Morgue clan, saying it's of the highest quality and hard to get. Vikir declines it, saying he needs cacao beans that have a rich aroma. Barrymore and the chefs are confused by the request. Cacao beans, colored purple and called bloody beans, are given to Vikir as the chef explains to him that these bloody beans were known for their rich aroma. Each bean can produce 100 liters of chocolate. Vikir tastes them and is appalled by their bitterness. Barrymore wonders to himself if Vikir really likes chocolate enough to eat such bitter beans on their own, thinking Vikir was brilliant for finding a way to get chocolate even with the restrictions placed by the patriarch. The chef asks if he wants to process the beans, but Vikir declines and takes them as is. Barrymore wonders if Vikir has such a weird taste. However, Vikir did not get the bloody beans to turn them into chocolate to eat but to use them in the practical exam 5 days later. Up in the mountains, Vikir stands, grinning widely, knowing that a huge catastrophe will occur, something that has never happened in the clan before. In this world, the Baskerville family is referred to as the Berserker family. Children of the Baskerville family are put through strenuous events and early education from a young age. When they are able to take their first steps, for their basic stamina, they need to run up a steep mountain. Except for certain exceptions, they are never allowed to lie down or be on their stomachs. When it's time to sleep, in order to adjust to tough environments, they can only sleep alongside a monster corpse, no teddy bear or pillows like most of us. When that period ends, they turn 8 years old, and the young hounds will start their deadly evaluation. This is what caused the Baskerville family to be called the Berserker family. This brings us to the practical evaluation, a survival exam, in a mountain that's located on the outskirts of the territory, filled with monsters. The young masters are gathered in a territory at the far end of the La Rouge et Le Noir mountain. Pavlov, the instructor of the exam and a member of the Shadow Dogs, informs them that the basic contents of the practical evaluation is simple. He instructs the masters on what needs to be done: survive for 1 month while hunting large and strong monsters. They needed to be mindful of these 2 conditions and survive. 10 points are given for surviving, 30 if they survive without being disabled. Failing others and surviving gives them 50 points. Surviving after defeating a monster, 70 points. If all conditions mentioned are met, 90 points. In addition, stealing badges from others makes their points yours. Dying results in 0 points. 100 points do not exist. Pavlov reminds them of Hugo's lesson: a swordsman dies when they become arrogant. He advises them not to leave the designated area, as the mountain contains many undiscovered things. It was recommended that they move within the given space where they had subjugated the monsters. During the exam, shadow dogs, also known as guardian knights, will be hiding and grading them. But as Pavlov was giving out the instructions, gossip spreads amongst the candidates as they talk of the rumors about Vikir, where he had survived for more than 6 minutes in the Styx River and that he had killed 2 poisonous vipers when he was a baby, even scoring full marks in the theory exam, making them wonder if he was going to be good at the practical as well. Vikir smiles as he remembers the mountain. After all, it's been some time since he was here from his previous life. The triplets avoid looking at him. Pavlov rings the bell, marking the start of the exam, and prays for their fortune. The young masters instantly vanish, each with a plan of their own. One of the young masters was eager to occupy an advantageous area, and decided on the place he saw in last year's exam. While other young masters decide to team up and steal the badges from others while following them. The triplets argue with one another, deciding on doing things on their own instead of helping one another like before. The moment the young masters all left, Pavlov took out a single cigarette, noting that the exam has officially begun. As he takes a puff, he notes that killing is not prohibited but discouraged instead. After all, if they killed someone else, they would be deducted points, so everyone usually tries their best in order not to kill someone easily. Pavlov smokes a cigarette. As the wind lifts his fringe, revealing a nasty scar across his left eye, he knows that the shadow dogs will do their best in order to keep casualties to a minimum. A shadow dog follows Vikir, wondering where he is going, as the area they were at was next to the restricted area. This shadow dog was actually looking forward to seeing Vikir's skills due to his previous achievements since childhood. Vikir arrives at a huge tree, poking at the ground to check as the soft ground is best. He decides to live and take a break here as the shadow dog watches him. The shadow dog is shocked at Vikir taking a break. Vikir gathers wood and starts building things like in Minecraft while the others fight amongst themselves. Even the triplets ended up fighting with a bear together. Meanwhile, T the shadow dog is in disbelief as Vikir simply gathers resources, wondering if he plans to just hide here. The shadow dog decides to leave, thinking that the rumors about Vikir were all fake. After thinking that Vikir was just going to hide during the exam, the shadow dog decides that there was no point in following him and leaves. The moment he does, Vikir could sense that the shadow dog has left. He was glad that the shadow dog was finally gone. Looking at the campfire while he cooks a meal, Vikir recalled how camping like this reminded him of his old days. Before, a subordinate had told Vikir that cacao beans make fish less smelly, and that bloody beans were the best since they had a high concentration of cacao. Vikir stares into the flames and smoke, knowing he has finished preparing, deciding to start hunting as pits of spears surround him. The time to hunt was now. A few days pass as Vikir walks into the restricted area. Looking around, he knew that from this point onwards, it was the unknown restricted area. In his previous life as a scout, Vikir could walk around here casually. As he ventures deeper into the unknown area, Vikir could smell something that pierced his nose, along with some burnt tree roots which made him realize that what he was looking for was around here somewhere. The sound of something sizzling in the middle of the night catches his attention as he turns to look at what it was. Our boy finds burning poop. Yes, poop is on fire in this world, meaning only one monster has that kind of poop in this area. Vikir looks at something with a smile. Back in his scouting days, the thing he was looking at was pretty annoying, but right now, in the present, he was actually happy to find it. A beast with flames in its mouth stands above Vikir, a hellhound. The hellhound is a beast that swallowed the hellfires of the oil world, causing its body to become one with flames. Vikir was barely able to defeat one at the age of 18 in his past life. Being 8 years old now, it is impossible for him to defeat it now. However, Vikir, thanks to his past life, knows a way where even a child can take on a hellhound. He dashes towards the hellhound, knowing that one of its weaknesses is that it moves in straight lines only, making it hard to change directions but easy to dodge as he slides underneath the hellhound. The hellhound is stunned that Vikir dodged. Vikir opens a bottle of water, spraying it across the ground. Another weakness for hellhounds: they cannot step across any volume of water, no matter how deep the water is. This causes the hellhound to take a detour to avoid the water on the ground as it runs towards Vikir. Thanks to the water, it exposes another weakness that all canines have, opening its mouth while running. Vikir takes a step back as the hellhound lunges at him with its mouth open, the exact moment Vikir has waited for. Vikir flicks something into its mouth and easily dodges the hellhound as it tries to circle back to Vikir. However, the hellhound feels something is wrong and stumbles to the ground, whimpering. Vikir reveals that chocolate is poison to canines, and since one bloody bean can make 100 liters of chocolate, it is the ultimate poison for it. The hellhound lays on the ground, whimpering, unable to move. Vikir walks towards it, drawing his sword, looking for where the ribs aren't present to target its kidney as that was its weak spot. The area of weakness turns out to be its kidney. The hellhound whimpers in pain as the sword pierces its body. Vikir delivers the final blow, and a blue essence forms from the body. It is called XP or karma, created when you catch monsters after energy accumulates in their bodies, making them stronger. Vikir absorbs it, making the short sword he wields lighter. Vikir is happy, knowing he'll be able to catch up to his regression state before he is of age. He wonders what face Hugo will make when he finds out that an 8-year-old brought back a monster with a risk rating of B+. With this monster, Vikir secures first place in the practical test and has decided on what reward to get. An enormous reward that he would never dream of asking for in his previous life. He was going to take a certain book, the value of which no one in this era really knows, except for him. Vikir proceeds to decapitate the head of the hellhound but senses a presence behind him. He turns to see 4 more hellhounds. Oh hell no, he wonders if they came because of its cries and that they want to avenge it. Vikir chops off the head of the dead hellhound, excited at the thought of fighting more hellhounds as he never planned on just killing one of them. He even still has more beans left. However, a bigger presence is felt by the hellhounds, and Vikir notices. Believing the hellhounds to be afraid of his bloodthirst, the hellhounds bow their heads in fear. But hellhounds never submit, even if they are to die. Vikir realizes something and turns around to see a 3-headed figure. This dog monster was different as its aura was purple along with whatever is coming out of it. A Cerberus? Vikir is alarmed as it has a risk rating of A+ but was supposed to be at the 7th ridge. Why is it here on the 1st? Vikir thinks. Vikir then notices wounds and blood dripping from its body. Multiple arrows and other injuries are inflicted upon the beast upon closer inspection, which meant that someone else was hunting this beast down. Vikir concludes that it's because of the barbarian tribes across the mountain, as it was their territory, and that the Cerberus came all this way because it was being chased by them. Vikir sees the chance of a lifetime, to hunt an injured A+ beast. He must kill it no matter what. Vikir has been hiding his power back at the Baskerville household. This includes the fact that he had mastered the 3rd Baskerville technique and being at a high level as a sword expert. Our boy has already reached a level that no other hounds would attain when they became adults. Vikir covers his blade in aura and dashes to the injured Cerberus. He attempts to slice one of its heads but is interfered with by another head. He slices it in reaction. Upon slicing it, Vikir realizes that killing it is possible. Before his regression, due to the war with demons, Vikir was able to polish his swordsmanship to the point that there was no sign of unnecessary movements in his techniques. Add to that his strengthened body from the Styx River. All the weapons Vikir possessed was working well against the Cerberus. But that's what he thought. Reality hits him hard as the Cerberus lands a deadly blow on Vikir, smashing his sword to bits. Vikir had let his guard down for a moment, resulting in a deadly blow from its claws. Vikir is flung straight into a tree. He coughs blood as his eyes turn white from the impact. The story continues with our main character, Vikir, facing off against the Cerberus after receiving a deadly blow from it. Vikir is unconscious as he lies against a tree. He suddenly awakens, wondering if he had lost consciousness after the direct hit dealt to him by the Cerberus as it walks toward him. He feels the pain in his left arm, thinking it might have been ripped out. He checks to see and is surprised to find his arm still intact. Even if the Cerberus is wounded, he couldn't believe that its attack only did this much damage, thanking the river Styx's effect for helping keep his arm. As the Cerberus readies for another attack, it dashes toward him, smashing the tree behind him into bits. Vikir leaps out of the way before it can harm him, but he realizes that although his arm is still there, the damage remains, and he won't be able to take a second hit. As the Cerberus turns around, Vikir considers the situation as a journey that every experienced hunter must find a way out of. With the odds against him, he decides to run away as fast as possible. Alarmed by his sudden retreat, the Cerberus chases after Vikir, who thinks he is lucky that the Cerberus is injured. Otherwise, he would have been torn apart by now. As he continues to run, his goal is to make it past the iron fence to exit the restricted area. Vikir leaps over the iron fence and readies himself to reach the place he had prepared beforehand as the Cerberus reaches the iron fence as well. If he is caught before reaching that place, it will be the end for him. The Cerberus rips apart the iron fence with its face, roaring loudly as it continues its chase. Dashing through the trees as fast as he can, Vikir looks around, wondering where the heck was the place he prepared. Just in time, Vikir spots the area where he had set up his trap. He notices a pile of wood in front of a tree, marking the spot. He runs with all his might, thinking to himself, just a little bit further. With the Cerberus closing in, he realizes it's the perfect moment and leaps into the air just as the Cerberus opens its mouth to attack. A single step forward onto a marking made up of small pebbles causes it to sink into the ground. Vikir lands on his back, completely out of breath, but safe from its attack, and breathing heavily, while the Cerberus is met with many wooden spears hidden in the ground below. He welcomes it to the cradle of swords. Wiping the sweat off his face, Vikir feels relieved that the traps he made for hellhounds were effective against the Cerberus. Bloody beans were spread onto the spears in the ground. Being the same species as the hellhounds, the Cerberus is easily poisoned as its two heads cough, vomit, and are in pain, while its middle head notices Vikir and growls at him. He holds a spear, aims it at the Cerberus, knowing that a high-ranking demon like it wouldn't die instantly, and throws it with all his might, but the spear bounces off its body, and the Cerberus growls loudly in response. Vikir starts to count down from 7. With each step the Cerberus takes, a second passes as it slowly reaches Vikir. As the countdown reaches 0, the Cerberus simply collapses to the ground. Letting out a sigh of relief, Vikir is pleased to see the Cerberus fall before him, confirming that the rumors about the 7 steps were true. He explains that the wooden spear he threw was different from the others. It was laced with the poison from the bloody mamba's venomous fang from when he was a baby, a poison which doesn't allow you to walk more than 7 steps once you have been bitten by it. Vikir was glad he hid it when he was younger. After absorbing the mana from the Cerberus, indicating it is fully dead this time, Vikir stares at its corpse, wondering how to bring it back, but before that, he has something else to do. Vikir knew that the presence of a Cerberus meant one thing: dungeons, as Cerberus were gatekeepers that protected their territories. A dungeon was a mysterious place that harbors treasure. Sometimes, powerful monsters would use them as their lair. Since its gatekeeper is dead, the dungeon is free to be explored. Arboid is the nasty. He decides to cover himself in the Cerberus poop, spreading it all over his body, making sure that he could avoid battling small monsters by using the scent of the Cerberus. Comment below if you're willing to do the same thing, covering yourself in poop. Using the dried soil, rotten leaves, and moist roots, Vikir backtracks the Cerberus by following its footprints and drool. He walks to an opening, saying, "I found it." Entering the cave, Vikir recalls that the cave was meant to be discovered in a few years' time. As he stares deep into the cave, he feels its mana beneath the rotten surface, knowing it hasn't been discovered or cleared yet. No light was coming out of it, making the cave seem deeper than he initially thought. He smiles happily, eyes glowing with excitement, over the thought of the treasures that might lie within the dungeon as he slowly enters. As Vikir ventures deeper into the dungeon, he notices red veins of ruby minerals throughout the area, sensing they are connected to the Red All Mountain. When light appears before him, indicating the entrance to the dungeon, the brightness forces Vikir to cover his face with his hand. Entering a large room, he spots a floating red stone at the center. Realizing the dungeon's interior is bright due to the mana imbued into the ruby, Vikir approaches the floating ruby, but then notices something behind it, a skeleton with a note, showing that someone had been here before him. Inspecting the skeleton, Vikir sees injuries caused by stabbings and dried brown blood stains as he picks up the note on the ground. A long time has passed for the skeleton. Vikir reads the note and recognizes it as a Baskerville member's writing. The note reveals that the writer did not want to disclose his name and asks to be called Cain, as he felt that there was no need to dirty this pure white paper with his name. The reason behind the note was to prevent future generations from making the same mistake that he did. The note further explains that the stone chamber was talked about in the family as a legend. Cain writes that he and his brother Abel coincidentally came across this place while raiding the dungeon in its countless trials. They killed many monsters before arriving at the chamber, only to find the final assignment. This final assignment tied their feet there for a very long time, 3 years to be exact. Vikir couldn't believe the brothers actually stayed for 3 years, hinting that the brothers were desperate for the treasure and that the final assignment was somewhere in the chamber. He looks at the stand of the floating ruby and sees some writing. When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1, was the riddle written on the stand. The note continues, describing how the brothers contemplated the ominous text until they concluded that, because they were twins, they were once 1 in their mother's womb, but when born, they became 2. Cain and Abel believed that to obtain the treasure, they had to become 1 again. This meant that only one of them could leave with the treasure. After a fierce battle, Cain ended up killing his own brother, leaving only one person in the stone chamber. But nothing changed. Cain wonders why the treasure did not appear even after killing his own brother, and he wonders why, screaming. He decides to leave, wanting to tell others who were brave enough to find this place to leave immediately, stating there is nothing to gain in this devil's den that only serves to taunt humans. Vikir concludes that the brothers did everything they could, only to leave empty-handed. Knowing he has no twin, Vikir believes that the brothers misinterpreted the text as he looks at the ruby, thinking about the riddle again. He thinks hard, knowing that no dungeon is unbeatable. Upon looking at the skeleton again, an idea comes to mind. Vikir figures it out, stating that the brothers were unlucky due to being twins and fixated on that idea. He mentions that the answer lies in the dungeon as he reaches for the ruby, saying that when he entered the dungeon, he was 1, but as soon as the ruby light was cast upon him, he became 2 due to his shadow. Smashing the ruby into pieces, Vikir knows that without its light, darkness re-enters, making the stone chamber open its final stage. The riddle's answer was shadow. As pieces of the ruby fall to the ground, they start to rise up, and energy from the rubies opens the passageway in front of Vikir. He smiles happily as the final stage opens, revealing a sword, the relic of this devil's den, the cause of the brothers' death. The sword glows red with an evil aura. The text below states that only those with Baskerville's blood can wield Beelzebub. He is shocked to find that the sword is Beelzebub as he stands in front of it. He recalls reading a picture book once during his childhood. It was about the gluttonous fly, Beelzebub, an unprecedented great monster that invaded the lands in the old legends as part of the devil's holy constellation called the 7 Calamities. To stand up against the 7 calamities, the heads of each of the 7 families took 1 each. The first patriarch of the Baskerville clan fought against the gluttony, Beelzebub. Remnants of Beelzebub were stored in the lands of the Baskerville. Its demonic energy was said to lure monsters, an old legend that no one believes now. But the legend was true, as the sword was later taken by the demon clans, resulting in countless deaths among humans on the battlefield. Vikir grabs the sword in excitement, saying that it won't happen again in this lifetime as the sword is now his. As he holds onto the sword, it lets out ferocious energy as if it were howling. He grunts loudly as the sword seems to be absorbed by his hand, leaving a black and red mark on it. The sword places itself into Vikir's hand before appearing as a blade from his arm. He mentions that he is lucky to have a blade made from a devil's holy constellation as the blade exudes a murderous aura. His red eyes glow, similar to the blade, as he raises it to his face, wondering how much stronger he will be in this life. Our boy was excited to find out. Looking around, Vikir realizes there is nothing else for him to take and prepares to leave. But he feels something is wrong with his body. Stumbling to the ground, he wonders what is wrong. Is he dizzy? No, he is hungry. Beelzebub was making a loud whining noise and Vikir wondered if it wanted to eat something. He leaves the dungeon, holding his stomach in hunger, noting that his sense of smell has improved as he smells something delicious. The sword pulls him along, much to his surprise, making him wonder if there is something to eat in the direction it's pulling him toward. He reaches the corpse of the hellhound he had killed before. Beelzebub shoots out like a tube into the corpse. As it absorbs the blood, Vikir feels his insides getting back to normal, guessing that Beelzebub was starving for a long time. He hopes the mountain's dried condition was not due to the sword's hunger and wonders how long it takes to feed it. But he also wonders how he was going to keep up with Beelzebub's insane binge-eating disorder. Beelzebub makes a happy sound as it has eaten well and absorbed the hellhound's ability, hemorrhage. Vikir wonders if this is Beelzebub's inherent ability. Beelzebub was the glutton of flies and was said to possess the power to absorb its enemies' skills as its own. Since its absorption amount was close to infinite, many people lost their abilities and became obsolete. But due to it being hazardous, Vikir could only steal up to 3 skills for now. He describes the hellhound's ability, hemorrhage, as a skill that constantly pumps out the blood of its opponent even through the smallest of wounds. Realizing he can steal abilities, he looks at the Cerberus corpse. Beelzebub grows excited at the thought of feeding on it, but Vikir is alarmed and asks it to wait. He explains that he can't eat all of it because if it's too damaged, he won't be able to explain it during the autopsy. Thinking silently as Beelzebub makes constant noises while consuming the corpse, Vikir slaps Beelzebub, saying it's had enough. Though Beelzebub is upset, it has acquired 2 new skills, burn injury from Cerberus and high-speed regeneration from a sewer rat. Vikir was surprised to see this new skill, and spots the dead body of a sewer rat that was crushed underneath the Cerberus. Vikir picks up the rat, knowing that it was a great achievement to have acquired the burn injury skill from the Cerberus. Since burning to death was one of the worst pains a human could experience, it was even much worse than the hellhound's hemorrhage. Now that he is done preparing the monster to submit for the practical exam, Vikir decides to wait at the practical exam site until it is over. When the young hounds gather back together, each of them was covered in various injuries. They would receive a shield, sword, or necklace as their reward based on the parts produced from the monsters they hunted during the practical exam. As monster parts are laid on the table, the senior members are astonished at what Vikir had hunted, and Hugo is alarmed to hear the news. Barrymore reports that during the practical exam, Vikir had accidentally crossed over into the restricted area, allowing him to hunt a Cerberus, a monster with a risk rating of A-. He further reports that it was wounded by the barbarian clan and that Vikir had applied poison to his wooden spear. Hugo mentions that a Cerberus is something that even the family's guardians would avoid. Hugo further inquires about the kind of poison that could kill a Cerberus and where Vikir had obtained it. Barrymore mentions that the report did not include such details and wanted to ask Vikir, but Vikir had returned to the dorm as he was too tired. Hugo compliments Vikir, acknowledging his slyness, and notes that information is power and power is your worth. Barrymore is shocked that a master named Van and not Lerla is this talented. Hugo responds that he himself is unlike the previous leaders. He doesn't discriminate against a hound based on its bloodline when raising them, as long as they have enough talent and spite. Adding that there are mutts from the royal bloodlines, he asks Barrymore if he understands him. Barrymore is concerned as he ponders whether Hugo is thinking about his second son who is preparing for isolation training, and apologizes to Hugo. Hugo says it's all right and asks for Vikir to be summoned. Vikir stands before them with a smile on his face. Hugo asks how he caught the Cerberus during the practical exam, and Vikir explains that he placed chocolate on his wooden spear, explaining to them that it's lethal to canine monsters. Hugo asks if that's why he asked for chocolate before, and Vikir confirms it. Barrymore wonders to himself if this is how fathers and sons usually talk to each other, as they didn't greet each other but just went straight into the topic. Hugo further questions Vikir on why he didn't respond when the butler asked him about the hunt, to which Vikir replies, "He wasn't my master." Hugo then asks, "Who is your master?" Vikir responds, "The master of the clan, since I belong to the clan." Hugo is pleased with the reply and rewards Vikir with the corpse of the monster. In addition, he was willing to grant him a wish since our boy also scored the highest. Hearing that from Hugo, Vikir was thinking that he was finally getting what he wanted, so he requested access to the 10,000 Epistle Library. The 10,000 Epistle Library is one of the largest libraries in the Empire and resides deep within the heart of the Baskerville clan. Hugo ponders, asking if Vikir knew that only the patriarch and second in command, along with their direct descendants, are allowed to enter. Vikir says that if it is not permitted, he will give up on it, thinking that he needs to sneak in instead. To Vikir's surprise, Hugo grants him access and asks him to read the 6th technique of the family located within the 6th restricted zone deep inside the library. Vikir is stunned that he was given permission to learn a technique that an illegitimate child is not allowed to. There had never been a case where a child with the middle name Van was taught beyond the 4th technique. He even recalls that Hugo's current level is the 7th technique and that in his past life, Hugo had reached the 9th. Vikir remembers the discrimination he faced and promises that in this life, he will surpass Hugo. He will obtain the greatest essence of Baskerville, a textbook containing the teachings of the first patriarch who subjugated the 7 great disasters. Hugo stares at Vikir, looking forward to his progress, and wishes him luck. Vikir bows his head, thanking Hugo and promising to surpass his expectations, with his eyes glowing red with hatred. As Vikir knew that Hugo would never realize the true value of the random book he just handed over to him. When Vikir enters the 10,000 epistle library, he stands there, saying out loud that this is the first time he has come in person. He searches through the swordsmanship books, seeing the names of the ones he had wanted to desperately learn in his past life. No matter how much mana an illegitimate child of the Baskerville had, they can't learn any swordsmanship that is superior to the 4th technique. In order to ensure that the children who become hounds do not bare their teeth towards their master, this was a defense mechanism the Baskerville family had created. Spotting a book locked with a chain, Vikir wonders if this is the book he needs. Taking out a key, Vikir couldn't believe that Hugo would offer him the book on the 6th technique, an opportunity that was never given to him in his previous life. As he turns the key in the lock, he wonders if Hugo thinks he couldn't memorize the technique in a day since he was just a kid. As he reads the book, Vikir recalls that in his past life, he had memorized the theory behind the 1st to 4th techniques until he was sick of it. He did it so he could deduce and speculate the theory behind the 5th technique. As he read the book, it tells him that he needed to stop the flow of mana after drawing the 4th tooth. Vikir wonders if that was the reason he could not make the 5th tooth. According to Baskerville swordsmanship, one tooth represents the 1st technique, the 2nd tooth represents the 2nd technique, and so on. When drawing a tooth, a special trait, a red sword energy appears. Flipping through the book, Vikir states that he doesn't care about the 6th technique and that the real reason he came to the library was different. Because what he wanted was a stage that was higher than what the book could provide. He returns to the guards, who are surprised to see him come out of the library so quickly. They ask if he left something outside and if they should get it for him, mentioning there are more books about swordsmanship deep within the library. He tells them that he has finished what he came for. When the guard asks if he wants to stay longer, Vikir declines, saying he wants to read other books and that they should do what they need to do in the meantime. As Vikir walks to the spiral staircase, the guards whisper to each other, saying that the place he is going to only has miscellaneous books, and that if they were Vikir, they would be busy reading the swordsmanship books deep within the library. They wonder if Vikir doesn't know the worth of the books, but Vikir chooses to leave them to their thoughts, knowing they don't realize the true value of the books in the miscellaneous section, as there was a certain treasure lying somewhere in there. Upon reaching the next floor, Vikir looks around at the books, noticing one that stands out. He found it, the book called A Lurking Ambush. Vikir is happy to find it as he was sure this was what he was looking for. Opening it, the book was on the basics of the 1st technique that the Baskerville children don't read. Due to the ripped pages, they considered it a useless, boring book. But he grins widely, knowing he is the only one who understands its true worth. Recalling a memory from before his regression, Vikir remembers belonging to a hound squad that found a strange relic in the dungeon on the border of the La Rouge et Le Noir mountain. It contained a page from a swordsmanship book, a single ripped page. Written with Baskerville handwriting, only Hugo found this remarkable, ordering everyone to search through the whole library to find the book that matched the page. That book was A Lurking Ambush, the same one Vikir now holds. The book contains the 10th technique that the ancestors wrote. Vikir further recalls that Hugo went crazy over the 10th technique and released the hounds to find the remaining 6 pages containing the technique. Realizing the pages were hidden among the 7 great families, Hugo declared war on them and sent hounds to those that refused. After sacrificing many hounds, all the pages were eventually given to Hugo. The reward for doing so was Vikir's death. Vikir grows angry as he remembers those unpleasant memories while holding the book, knowing that once Hugo achieved the 9th technique, it resulted in piles of hound corpses and blood. Vowing that it won't happen in this life, Vikir reminds himself that the pages Hugo got were all given by him, allowing him to remember the content on each page and that the reason he could not go past the 4th technique was the lack of access to the original book. Reading the book, Vikir realizes that without the other pages, the book makes no sense, but the moment you use the missing pages and fill in the blanks, the false and misleading information turns into a masterpiece of a book. He reminds himself that he had reached the highest level of graduator aura and the highest level of the fourth technique before he regressed as he reads the book, knowing that before he turns 15, he must reclaim the power he had before his regression. Night turns to day as Vikir immerses himself in reading the book. After finishing, he wonders if he spent the entire day reading, but thanks to that, he was able to memorize the book's contents from start to finish. Looking around, Vikir does not sense the presence of the guardian knights. He closes his eyes, thinking that right now, he couldn't draw the 10th teeth with his current body, but if it's right now, he wonders if he could achieve the 5th technique that he couldn't reach in his previous life. And so, he imagines a figure standing before him as his arm glows with a red aura. Opening his eyes, he strikes the figure using the first technique, continuing the strikes and moving on from the first to the second technique and more. He grits his teeth as he thinks of his past self as pathetic. After working hard to reach the highest level of graduator aura, Vikir was unsuitable to learn a proper sword technique, making the direct bloodline hostile to him. The main reason he couldn't go past the stage of the 5th technique was that he was an illegitimate child. Dashing to the side of the figure once again, he asks if they thought he would live the same way again. As he approaches the figure, it transforms into the older version of Hugo. Vikir slices Hugo relentlessly and exits the imaginary space. Breathing hard, he looks at his hand, thinking he is still weak and wondering if he actually drew out the 5th tooth. Clenching both his fists in victory at his achievement, it felt like something hot from deep within his heart emerged and shot up to his neck. Vikir was so happy at the fact that he could do the 5th technique to the point he could cry. Continuing to look around, he wonders if there is a sword nearby to test the 5th technique again. At a record-breaking speed in Baskerville history, a young hound's canine teeth bared towards his master were growing. Finally succeeding in drawing the 5th tooth, Vikir believes he can reach the level he was at as long as his mana can support it. Smiling happily, he notes that his mana capacity has increased and reached another level. A red liquid aura covers his hand, showing signs of a graduator. Vikir has gone from a high-class sword expert to a low-class graduator, a point that had taken him 30 years to reach, but he has reached it at 8 years old now. Graduators are on a whole different level compared to sword experts, as their aura turns from solid to liquid, increasing in density and allowing for it to be used more freely. Knowing his swordsmanship is better now and that he can reach the 10th technique means endless possibilities. Piercing Fang was what he learned before, which allowed him to grow stronger in a short period of time, but had limitations. However, the lurking ambush is the perfect sword technique that can transition between offense and defense with no growth limitations. Placing the book near the window, Vikir contemplates challenging a mid-class graduator and believes he has a 100% chance of assassination and about 50% if they face him head-on. The only problem now is how much to show Hugo. Vikir knows he can't reveal too much or too little of his strength. He needed to give Hugo something to look forward to, so he could have enough time to take everything he needed. He then takes out a silver object from his pocket and places it in front of the book, using the sunlight to start a small fire on the book. Grinning to himself at what he has just done, Vikir sets the book aflame, making it impossible for others to reach the 10th technique, and ensuring that he is the only one who knows how this time. As the guardian knights appear behind him, they ask what the smell is. When they question Vikir, he replies that he accidentally left the magnifying glass around and burnt the book. The guards are relieved to hear that only a useless book was damaged. Vikir asks the guards if they should bother with such a small thing since there are bigger problems to handle. The guards agree to keep it a secret if Vikir does as well. Vikir agrees and proceeds to leave. The guards are pleased, thinking of him as a nice person deserving of their respect as he walks away with a smile. When Vikir appears before Hugo and Barrymore once again, Hugo asks if he has reached enlightenment. Vikir replies, sort of. Hugo asks what he has learned, and Vikir mentions that he felt something warm and sharp yet soft and viscous. Both Barrymore and Hugo are alarmed at hearing this, and Barrymore wonders if it was an aura. Aura, the sign that you have officially entered the world of the sword. This was something only geniuses could only reach at 15-year-olds after years of training, in order to reach the level of a low-class sword expert. Hugo thinks to himself about why he is getting excited over an 8-year-old and asks Vikir to show him, to which Vikir accepts happily. An arena is showcased, and many young masters are confused as Vikir is seen standing with a sword. Barrymore asks Hugo how he intends to test Vikir's skills, and Hugo replies that a monster will be released, a hungry and fierce one. The gate opens, and a huge orc exits, chained all over its body. It growls loudly with menacing red eyes. Other young masters in the stands are shocked, wondering if an 8-year-old can take on an orc by himself. Standing face to face, Hugo signals the knight to remove the orc's chains. It screams out powerfully and rushes toward Vikir. With a calm expression, Vikir slices the orc's arm off with a single swing, shocking everyone present. The orc is stunned by its wound, and Vikir wastes no time, dashing low to slice its leg off in one strike again, causing the orc to fall to the ground. The orc remains confused, not understanding what has happened to it. Vikir looks back, thinking that the orc is confused about why it's bleeding for the first time and that its regenerative skill won't activate. It's due to the skill of the bloodhound, which overpowered the orc's ability. People in the stands are left wondering how Vikir is that strong, while Hugo stares, deep in thought. Vikir looks at him, knowing he is trying to determine what he learned in the library, and proceeds to show him what he wants. Hugo and Barrymore look alarmed as Vikir reveals his aura blade, with his sword covered in a strong red aura. The orc tries to get up, but senses a red presence approaching it, only for its head to be smashed to bits as Vikir slashes through it like butter with a quick dash, his sword enveloped in the aura. Hugo is shocked, seeing that red aura from Vikir, while Barrymore congratulates Hugo on witnessing the birth of a genius, leaving Hugo wondering if that was all. Barrymore further states that he hasn't seen this kind of talent from the other families, but Hugo stops him, noting that something was wrong with the orc. Seeing its blood not stopping even though orcs are famous for their regeneration, he pushes Vikir's victory as a result of the orc being weakened, while Barrymore wonders why he can't express his happiness. Vikir then calls out to his father and asks if there is anything stronger, with a smile on his face, surprising Hugo.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.